el audio original, que es la opción más baja en el menú después de hacer clic en el icono del globo.
Xin chào và cảm ơn quý vị đã tham dự buổi họp ngày hôm nay. Để truy cập vào phần thông dịch của ứng dụng Zoom, xin nhấn vào biểu tượng hình quả địa cầu ở phía dưới của màn hình và chọn ngôn ngữ theo ý muốn của quý vị. Để nghe rõ lời phiên dịch, chúng tôi khuyến khích quý vị chọn chức năng tắt âm thanh gốc nằm ở phía cuối trong phần tùy chọn của biểu tượng quả địa cầu.
您好，感谢您参加今天的会议。若需要使用 Zoom 的语言翻译，请点击 Zoom 窗口下方的地球图标，然后选择您所需要的语言。为了让您能够清楚地听到翻译语音，我们建议您选择关闭原本语音的选项。请点击地球图标后，选单上的最后一个选项。
Okay, perfect. And Brent, if we can go ahead and move on to the next slide. Thank you so much. So, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this community meeting with the City of San Jose. We'll start with introductions. So my name is Rina Horie. I am the project manager. I will pass it along to my colleague, Brent.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brent Carvalho. I am also a planner and I'll be assisting with the presentation. And I will pass it along over to Aparna to introduce herself.
Good evening, everyone. This is Aparna Ankola, Supervising Planner, Policy and Ordinance Team, and I'd like to pass it on to Martina Davis.
Hello, everybody. My name's Martina Davis. Happy to be here tonight. I'm a division manager in our planning division, and I'm here to help answer questions and help out with tonight. So looking forward to it.
Great. Now that we have those introductions, let's go ahead and move forward. So we'd like to start this meeting by getting to know who you are and where you're from. We want to know if you're a resident, homeowner, design professional, developer, or if you identify as something else. And then our second question, we'd like to know which council district you live in. We have provided a general map in case you needed a little bit of a refresher to see which council district you're in. We also have an additional option for those of you who are not from San Jose, and you may just reside outside of San Jose. So Brent, if you could go ahead and launch the poll, please. We'll go ahead and begin. Perfect. And hopefully everyone can see that. So yeah, the first question, and then scroll down a little bit will be the second question. And I'm gonna go ahead and give this a couple minutes so everyone has time to answer. I'll give it maybe until 6:08, just to give it a good window here. Okay. Great, we got a lot of the first question out of the way. Let's check question number 2. Want to make sure everyone has plenty of time to figure out where they're which council district they're in. Okay. Oh no, that's okay. Let's see. Okay. Thank you everyone. I believe it's about 6:08 now. If you haven't already, go ahead and answer the poll questions. I'll give you 5 more seconds. Okay. Okay, so we'll go ahead and end the poll here and okay, and we'll go ahead and share the results. So it looks like we have 86% of those of you in the audience today are residents, 43% homeowners, 29% designers, architects, 29% developers, no others. For question number 2, it looks like we've got some folks in Council District 6, it was 8, 9, and 10, and no one from not outside of San Jose, so that's fun. All right. Okay. So we'll go ahead with that. We'll go ahead and move forward. By the way, for those of you who still see the poll questions, you should be able to click the X at the top right to go ahead and close that so we can move forward with the rest of the presentation. Okay, and hopefully you saw those results. It's hard to see on the side there. Okay, so I'll go ahead and stop sharing. Okay, and Brent, if you can go ahead and move forward, please. Thank you. Great. So for this meeting, it will be about 30 minutes or so of presentation that's split up into 2 parts, each part followed by a question and answers Q&A, as well as public comments. My colleague here, Brent, will be presenting on agenda items 1 through 5, and we'll take a short break to hear your questions and comments on these items. Then I'll present on agenda items 6 and 7, as well as discussing next steps and jumping right into your questions and comments again. Lastly, we'll go ahead and wrap up this meeting with our contact information, so please feel free to reach out to us if you have any additional questions or comments.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started off talking about small lot subdivisions. There are 2 state Senate bills, SB 684 and SB 1123, which have come into effect recently and allow property owners a streamlined pathway for subdividing their lots into as many as 10 lots and with up to 10 units. ADUs are not permitted in conjunction with SB 684-1123 housing projects. But however, here are a few main criteria for eligibility in order to qualify for the streamlined subdivision. So for SB 684, which has been in effect since July of 2024, this allows subdivisions of properties which are zoned for multifamily development if they are less than or equal to 5 acres, and the minimum parcel size for the new parcels must be at least 600 square feet. SB 1123, which has been in effect since just this past July 2025, further expanded on SB 684 to allow subdivisions of properties which are vacant and zoned for single-family development if they are less than or equal to 1.5 acres. And each new parcel must be at least 1,200 square feet. Something to keep in mind here is that this update will ensure the city of San Jose is in conformance with state law. Since these subdivisions are already allowed by state law, if the city were to receive an application, they would have to process it if they meet the requirements. This update will help to ensure clarity and predictability in the development process for future applications. So next we're going to move on to group homes. The Department of Housing and Community Development commonly referred to as HCD, oversees the approval and implementation of cities' housing elements. During the most recent cycle of the housing element review, the city of San Jose was told we need to update the regulations for group homes. Group homes are typically located in residential zoning districts, and they are generally for people who have medical issues that require them to live in a community-oriented environment, which allows them to live independently and also participate in their local communities. You could think of these as single-family homes occupied by several people, maybe something like roommates, right? So the process we have right now is if you are licensed, you are considered a care facility. If you have 7 or more people living together, then that use is permitted by right. Or excuse me, 7 or fewer people living together, then that use is permitted by right. Whereas if you have 7 or more, you must apply for a conditional use permit. Through HCD's guidance, this update will include that an unlicensed service facility is permitted by right, regardless of the number of people living in that facility. Again, as a reminder, this update is being required by the State Department of Housing and Community Development in order to ensure that we are in compliance with our housing element approval. Next, we're going to talk about heat pumps. For those of you who may not be familiar with a heat pump is essentially a mechanical device that can be used to heat and or cool your home. And planning staff received a request from the Climate Action Commission to allow heat pumps as an exception to what can be built within a certain setback. Upon installation, heat pumps will maintain a minimum side setback of 3 feet from the property line, but shall conform to the zoning, the performance standards for the zoning district. For instance, the residential zoning district includes a noise standard of 55 decibels at the property line. The municipal code already makes exceptions for similar devices in setback areas, such as tankless water heaters, for example. And these updates are proposed in our residential, commercial, industrial, and urban village and mixed use zones. So moving on to hydrogen fuel cell stations. State Senate Bill 1418 was approved last year and has been in effect since just this past September. It requires cities and counties to create an expedited, streamlined permitting process for the installation of hydrogen fueling stations, similar to the streamlined electric vehicle charging stations. SB 1418 states cities must allow hydrogen fueling stations to be installed on parcels which are zoned either industrial, commercial, or on land that has previously or currently has been developed as a gas station. So this last slide I'll go ahead and cover. Planning staff is proposing a number of revisions to the municipal code, which are essentially cleanup of existing ordinances and helping to provide some better clarity for these existing regulations. I won't go into great detail about these updates. They are very technical in some respects, but I will explain generally what we are doing. So first we have the density bonus chapter and the ministerial approval chapter. Here, our goal is to remove redundant or copy-paste references to state laws. This won't essentially change any of the existing regulations, but it will help reduce the need for frequent updates to the code, which can be time-consuming for planning staff based on ongoing state law changes. Next, planning staff are updating references to off-sale alcohol use, specifically within the entertainment zones that were approved by City Council earlier this year. This update is consistent with the existing regulations for entertainment zones, which exist in Title 13 of our municipal code, and Title 13 covers streets, sidewalks, and public places. So next we have an update for the special use permit amendment, which already exists. However, we're now adding text into the code to explain how that process works. And the update for the mixed-use neighborhood standards, this is related to errors and inconsistencies that staff identified that, some of this text was just a little confusing. And so we're simply proposing edits to help clarify and streamline those regulations. So now we're going to move into our public comment break, and we'll be able to hear some of your questions and comments. We're going to be able to allocate about 2 minutes per person to ensure we have enough time to hear from everyone. Please unmute your device when your name is called. And for those of you who may be calling in, you would press *6 in order to unmute yourself. So we are now able to answer some of your questions. Rena, do we have anyone who's ready to speak?
Yes, Brent, we have Van T. Let me go ahead and unmute you so you can talk. Give me just a moment here. Okay, Van, are you able to?
Yes, I can hear you, Rina. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, great. Thank you. Go
Okay,
ahead.
great. Thanks for taking my question.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask about SB 1123. I looked up that bill, and there's a language in there that says, properties, besides being vacant and besides being zoned for single family and less than 1.5 acre, there's one criteria that says it is also substantially surrounded by qualified urban uses. I believe that's the language. Can you explain what that means for San Jose, that being surrounded by qualified urban uses?
Yeah, I can go ahead and take a crack at answering that. So I think that that's largely going to apply to properties within San Jose. We are an urban area, we're built out, we're developed. And essentially that just is a way to ensure that we're not seeing these subdivisions out in super rural areas where there's no access to infrastructure like sewers or water connections. Martina or Aparna, am I missing anything else on that? Do you have any comments to add?
No, yeah, I would agree with that. It's essentially to ensure that these aren't subdivision of kind of rural lots out in areas that are largely undeveloped. So the vast majority of San Jose would be surrounded by urban uses. It basically means the properties surrounding the subject property have development on them. So you would kind of only be eliminated based on that. I think would be pretty infrequent if you were looking at trying to use this bill, say on the periphery of the city where you are not surrounded, you're surrounded by vacant properties. But the vast majority of properties in San Jose would be considered to be surrounded by urban uses.
Can I follow up? So in San Jose, there is a map that designates I believe it's called the urban service area. Is that somehow related to this criteria?
Not directly, no. The bill does have a definition of what surrounded by urban uses means, so it would really just be looking at that and making sure that each individual property meets that definition.
And it's not related to that map that I just mentioned. So if a property I look up is, say, adjacent to that line, that doesn't mean that it's excluded.
Not necessarily, no. Now, if you're adjacent to that line, you are starting to get towards a kind of rural area, so it's worth looking to see, do you meet the exact criteria spelled out in that law, but it's not a one-to-one comparison, right? So
Oh,
it's worth
okay.
checking though. If you're adjacent to that line, it means you are kind of at the edge and you may not meet that criteria. So you have to look at it case by case basis.
So how do I check that then in that case?
So again, the law defines what it means. And off the top of my head, I think it is surrounded, it's that the properties surrounding it are developed, and it lays out how many, what percentage of the surrounding properties have to be developed. So it's really going back to that state law and checking that language right there that's in the state law. We're not adding anything beyond that.
Okay.
Yeah, it should be surrounded by at least 75% of its perimeter by these urban uses, and they could be residential, commercial.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Van, for your question. Okay, so next we have Sandra. I'll go ahead and, oh, apologies. Give me one moment here. My goodness gracious, is it? Okay, Sandra, are you able to unmute yourself?
I believe I am.
Okay, perfect. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, so I had several questions, and you can decide which ones are the most important. On the bill that I think it's 1123 that deals with vacant property, do you mean vacant homes or no buildings on that property? That's question one. Question two, what are the general decibel levels for a standard AC versus a heat pump? Question three, what was San Jose's intergovernmental relations positions on these two bills, SB 684 and 1123? And I guess I only had three. And do these bills also apply to county properties?
Okay, so yeah, I'll go ahead and try to take a crack at answering some of your questions. So the definition for vacant is listed in the bill. My understanding, my recollection is that it does have to have no habitable structures. There could potentially be like a dilapidated structure that would still allow it to qualify as vacant. But that's my understanding. So it wouldn't be something where you have like a rental unit existing currently. Um, with regards to decibel levels, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I'm not 100% sure what types of appliances might meet that 55 decibel level, but I would imagine that that has been in our code for a while. So it contemplated air conditioning units or similar types of devices. And that's why the setback is set the way that it is in order to ensure that they do have an appropriate distance away from a property line or an adjacent structure on an adjacent
Yeah,
property.
and let me elaborate on that one because we did look into that question, Sandra, is are there even heat pumps out there that could meet our noise standards? The answer is that you would need to choose a quiet model and likely install the probably some baffling or something that comes with it. So there are ones that we do think could meet that 55 decibel using their manufacturer's specs, but a lot of them won't. So that is something that we check at building permit stage, as we do require you to provide the specifications of the equipment, the noise decibels, and so then we can use that to determine, is it going to meet our standards? So yeah, there are some that will, but there are probably a lot of heat pumps that you would still need to keep out of the setback because it's not going to be quiet enough.
Thank you for that extra clarification, Martina. I appreciate that. You asked another question that I'm going to punt this one to Martina again. You're asking about this intergovernmental relations stance on SB 684 and 1123, and I'm not aware of that. But Martina, do you have any knowledge on that?
I will have to verify this, and Sandra, I can get back to you to verify, but we did not take a support position. I believe we took no position. We actually don't make positions on most bills. So with those two, I don't recall us taking a stated position either way, but I will have to verify that and get back to you.
And then I think you had another question about whether or not this applies to counties as well. My understanding is that yes, it would also apply to counties as long as they're meeting those similar criteria that we talked about, like urbanized areas.
Yeah, and then I'll just add to the vacant and uninhabitable. So we're going to take the kind of same interpretation a lot of cities took. So you could have a structure on there, but the structure has to not meet code to be like habitable. So it needs to have to be considered uninhabitable. So like no power, for example, and no way to get power would be an example, no plumbing. So it would be that. It wouldn't just be like, well, no one lives there. It really has to have enough that if the city was out there, we would red tag it as uninhabitable. That's what we would interpret to be uninhabitable to mean.
Okay, was that all of your questions, Sandra?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you can go ahead and mute yourself, or I can mute you.
I can do it, I think.
Okay.
Okay, moving right along here. So it looks like we have one question or comment from Evan. Okay, so Evan, give me just a moment here. Okay, there we go. So you should be
Hi,
able to see.
hi, thank you. I got a question. First part is regarding Senate Bill 684 and 1123. The first question is when the zone, is it referencing to the general plan and the general plan map and zoning map of that designation? Or my question is, let's say you have a property that's zoned at R2, but it has been only being used as single family. How does that apply in this particular differentiation of qualification for SB? Um, and the next question is, when he says ADU is not permitted in construction, my question is it if you subdivide this particular property under the SB bill here, you can never ever apply for ADU, or you could, but you have to be after you have completed the subdivision and built your units on top. That's my next question. The last question regarding group homes, I'm just curious. I heard the term, think of it as roommates, but it has to be under the goal, which means you have to operate this occupancy to assist tenants with disability, or it's not a requirement? And those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and try to answer your questions. So it wouldn't refer to the general plan designation. My understanding it is the zoning, so it is the single family zones or the multifamily zones, which we have in our code, which would differentiate your eligibility and your requirements that you need to follow. With regards to ADUs, my understanding is that cities and counties were given the option to elect whether or not to allow ADUs as well. San Jose's position was to not allow them to count towards the 10 unit count. But if Martina or Aparna, if you have additional feedback on that, happy to welcome your comments on that as well.
Yeah, so we did some analysis on the ADUs. So we are recommending to not allow ADUs with these at all. And one of the pretty much the main reason is that, so if you look at the bills, they have minimum density standards. And by the time you meet the minimum density standards, we are looking at very, very, very small lots. So we're talking townhomes kind of subdivisions. That just we didn't think had the room for ADUs. So we would like to push people into building as many of those for sale units as part of this development, and not try to make room for ADUs because frankly, we just didn't think that they would fit anyway in the type of development that would be called for if you're going to meet the densities. But that is a choice the city can make. So, if you have feedback that we should allow ADUs, we can, pass that along to the council as they're making that choice.
So then your last question was with regards to group homes. And I think what you were asking was whether or not service providers or like someone also lives in the house that performs some type of assistance. Do you want to correct me if I'm wrong on that one? If you can't unmute.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The reason I ask is I'm not looking to developing something like this. It's just I read in the municipal code once there's such thing called the residential service facility, but I never can find definition of what it is. I'm just really curious. Like what kind of service? To me, it's like, okay, do you do laundry service? Do you do like grocery service? I didn't know this was actually specifically for disabled. And I want to verify, is this program or this kind of usage is specifically allocated and sort of allow for assisting people with disabilities?
Okay, thank you for that extra clarification. My understanding is that they are like non-medical related services. So I think sort of like you said, cooking or cleaning, general types of things is how that would be allowed. But I don't believe an actual service provider and definitely not a medical professional lives in the home unless I'm wrong.
That's not entirely, that's not always the case. Sometimes they do. So I'll just clarify. So they generally are it's for people who need some sort of services and care, right? So, in theory, I guess anyone could live in a residential service facility, but that's not how we tend to see them operate. They tend to be either for the elderly, that's one option people will do. A lot of times those are licensed, they're not always. So people who need a little bit of extra care in their day-to-day life for some reason is really the audience for a service facility. And the operator may not live there full time, but they do have on-site premise, like an operator on site, either living there or they'll come to provide the services.
Thanks
Yeah,
for that additional clarification, Martina.
yeah, thank you. I was just curious because to me, I was trying to differentiate that between a guest house. There are different designation, different zoning allow for that. So I was just trying to figure out what it is, right? You know, it's something always confused me out. I just
Yeah,
wanted to
and
know.
they are defined if you do want to kind of dug into the weeds. Chapter 2100, so the last chapter of the zoning ordinance does include definitions, so you can kind
Oh,
of parse through the difference there of
the
the
2100. Okay, I'll give
different.
it a shot.
But generally
Yeah.
speaking, yeah, a guest house is intended, it's kind of an old-fashioned term, but it is sort of intended for more of just like a service, place to live, whereas the care or service facility is intended for providing daily care for people who are in need of care. That's kind of generally the differentiation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, great. And then, okay, so I think we have one last question from Van once again. And I think this will be our last one before we move forward. So go ahead and let's see here.
Yeah, thanks for taking my question.
Yeah.
It goes back to 1123 and specifically the meaning of a vacant property. Um, so assuming I have a large property which I subdivide, whether via SP9 or whether through a parcel map, and then I have a property that is not vacant because there's an existing house on there, and the second property is a vacant property. Does that second property qualify for SP 1123?
I mean, potentially, yes, if it meets the criteria, right? So
Yeah.
if it's vacant, it meets the zoning and it meets the other criteria.
So the fact that
Size.
I've used SP9 or a parcel map process to subdivide a property and make it vacant does not
Oh,
disqualify it.
I
can
think you
you
can
can you
use it only
layer them?
once. You can use it only once. You can do either the SB9 or the 684 just once.
Okay, it sounds like that there's some clarity needed on that because I mean, then specifically, does the language of the law say that subdivided properties are not qualified? That would be my follow-up question. Or does basically a property has to be originally vacant, or can it be vacant as a result of another process?
So yeah, my understanding was that you can't, it's an either or type of situation. I don't believe you can do SB9 and then SD 1123, like a two-step process. I don't believe that's an option, but Martina, if you have other thoughts on that, feel free to chime in. Are you reading the code?
Yeah, I'm checking the draft because that is my recollection is that the law says one or the other. And definitely you can't use
You
both bills
can't use
multiple
both.
times. Okay, so to
Yeah.
clarify, so the answer is no, you cannot use both. So if you create a lot and make it vacant through SB9, you can't then use 1123 to further subdivide it.
Okay, then so when we say a property is zoned as a residential property, does that include properties in a PD zoning?
Potentially, yes. It just depends on the plan development zone. If it is a plan development zone for multifamily, yes. If it's a plan development zone for single family, right, it meets the vacant uninhabitable, then yeah.
Yeah, because yeah, I guess the residential designation is shows up in a general plan map and not necessarily in a zoning map for properties that have undergone a PD process. So that's my question.
Yeah, so you have to look up, each PD zone is unique and you do have to look up the standards of each one. So that is something that we could help with. You can email zoning questions and kind of ask them
Okay.
that question. And then if
Okay.
you do, want to actually submit something to get more a deeper level of review, you can always submit what's called a preliminary review application, and it would be assigned to a planner, and we could take a closer look and kind of answer any detailed questions you have. So some options to kind of keep exploring your potential properties.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So how are we doing on time, Rena? It looks like we do have one more hand raised. Do we have enough time to take another question?
Let's see, it's about 6:38. Aparna, Martina, yeah.
Possibly this is a follow-up question and we can quickly move on after this.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Hello, just a quick question. Just I think I know the answer, but under the SB, the lot subdivision, the lot size 600 and 1200 is the actual lot size, right? It cannot be determined. Let's say for example, it cannot be like a parcel. It's the actual, physical lot. That just want some clarification.
Yes, that's correct. That's the areas that were assigned to those multifamily and single family.
All right, thank you.
Great. And let's see here. I just wanted to ask if we had any requests, either in Spanish, Chinese, and Vietnamese. Now is the time to raise your hand. Let's see. I don't think we have any. Brent, I think we're probably able to move on.
Okay. Okay, and so with that, I will go ahead and pass this over to my wonderfully talented colleague, Rena, and she will begin presenting on the last two agenda items.
Thank you so much, Brent. Okay, so moving right along, I will go ahead and present on SB 9. So what is SB 9? SB 9 is a state Senate bill that was signed in 2021, and it's been in effect since January 2022. What it does is it requires cities to approve housing projects in low density zones. It also requires for cities to allow up to 2 primary dwelling units on each subdivided lot, with the units being at least 800 square feet in size. A parcel cannot exceed a total of 4 dwelling units, whether it's been subdivided or not. SB 9 also requires a maximum of 4-foot side and rear setbacks. SB 9 projects are reviewed ministerially, which means there's no discretionary review or public hearing associated with the project, so long as it meets all of the objective design standards and requirements. For the state law provisions, Senate Bill 450 has been in effect as of January of this year. What it does is it prohibits cities from creating standards that do not apply consistently to all developments within the single unit zoning in any way, shape, or form. Moving right along. Thank you. So back in December of 2021, City Council directed planning staff to create objective design standards for SB 9 projects and to explore the possibility of expanding these standards to sites within R2 zoning districts and historic resources. This direction can also be found in our Housing Element Goals and Strategies P11. As part of that direction, we evaluated the SB 9 parcel eligibility. we found that there are approximately 127,955 sites that would likely qualify for SB9 in R1 zones, and there are approximately 5,723 sites in R2 zones that likely qualify for SB9 type projects. Planning staff has led 7 outreach meetings since the start of this effort to create objective design standards. Through emails and multiple conversations, public input has helped guide us towards balancing state regulations, city council direction, understanding what designers and architects aspire for, and what homeowners and community members want out of SB9 and future housing development. We've heard concerns related to access, unit configurations, privacy, heights, parking, open space, infrastructure, and much more. We took those comments and identified, based on those concerns, what could we do while following the requirements of SB 450 and what is required by Senate Bill 9. So now we'll move on to the proposed SB9 objective design standards. So urban lot splits. Urban lot splits are commonly known as subdivisions. Based on our prior outreach, we heard that there were physical constraints in subdividing based on how the code is written today. We also heard that the way these parcels are subdivided creates challenges for access to city services, like for our fire department. Looking at the diagrams towards the right of this slide, a typical lot can be divided in half or can be shaped like a flag lot. We call it a flag lot because if you can imagine on the diagram, there's a long pole and then there's a flag towards the top. Flag lots will typically have a house in the front and another unit in the rear. But to access the unit towards the back, it requires some sort of access corridor. Right now, our code specifies that the access corridor must be within 12 to 15 feet in width. What we're proposing is 2 sort of basic scenarios. Under scenario 1, if your street is narrow and less than 20 foot wide, your access corridor must maintain the 12 to 15 feet range. The feedback we received from fire department informed us that some streets within the city are too narrow, and that could potentially obstruct or impede fire trucks from being able to access the units during emergencies. Also, by maintaining the 12 to 15 feet corridor, parking could be accommodated on site and helps keep them off those narrow streets. In scenario 2, if your street is greater than 21 feet, you could choose a range of 4 to 7 feet or 12 to 15 feet of an access corridor width. In this scenario, you could opt for a pedestrian walkway. Doing so will ensure firefighters can pull their hose through that access corridor to extinguish any fires towards the rear of that parcel. So some of the main concerns we heard in terms of dwelling units were about privacy, open space, as well as permeability of the ground. So we are proposing a combination of floor area ratio and lot coverage. So the city currently uses floor area ratio to maintain the footprint of residential development. Lot coverage is a new mechanism that we will be implementing for SB9 to help maintain and adjust for the buildable footprint on a lot. We found that majority of R1 parcels are roughly 6,000 square foot in total size. With this typical sizing, we identified the appropriate FAR and lot coverage calculations that would allow for the same buildability that you would get with SB9, but reducing the overall footprint of coverage on a lot. When City Council directed us to identify, evaluate, and implement SB9 type projects in R2, we found that the dwelling unit standards in R1 would apply similarly to R2 parcels because majority of R2 parcels are also around 6,000 square feet in lot size and very similar. Okay. And for SB 9 dwelling unit standards, also concerns surrounding privacy, flooding, and limitations on buildability, we are proposing to align the height and setback standards to what we have for accessory dwelling units. As you can see in this diagram, the left house shows within 20 feet of the rear property line, the house height is limited to 20 feet. The house to the right, what we're proposing, shows that within 15 feet, the house height is limited to 25 feet. This is the extent of the proposed change for this dwelling unit standard. So for unit configurations, for SB 9 projects in R1 zones, you can apply either state or city ADU standards. If you choose the city, you can have one detached or attached ADU and one junior ADU. If you choose the state, you can have one detached or attached ADU, one conversion ADU, for example, like when you convert an existing garage, and then one junior ADU. And to better understand this slide, remember that R2 two-family is similar to SB 9 R1, but different in that it is not part of SB 9 state law, which requires the limitation of 4 units on a lot. The diagram is showing the requirements based on our current state ADU law and city ADU laws. So imagine your parcel is in an R2 zone. If your primary dwelling is detached, like the image to the top right, it gets treated like an R1 zone where you can have one detached ADU, one garage conversion, and one junior ADU. Remember, this is because it's being treated like an R1 one-family dwelling. If your parcel is in an R2 zone and the primary dwellings are attached to each other, we call this two-family, but you may know it as a duplex. Under state ADU law, a duplex lot can have up to 2 detached or attached ADUs and 1 conversion ADU for up to 5 units on the lot. Once again, the reason why this is more than what is allowed under SB 9 is because it's not part of SB 9 state law, and it is what we currently allow under state ADU law. City Council also directed planning staff to identify objective design standards for parcels with a historic resource designation. City Council directed staff to update our zoning code standards, explore potential for our SB 9 type projects in R2 zones, and to ensure that those in R2 zones with a structure built on or before 1950 moves forward with a clear discretionary historic review process. In addition, for those historic resource sites, we want to ensure we disallow demolition of any contributing buildings or individually significant structures, and if a single structure is split into 2 or more units, to require objective design standards. So during our analysis, we found of R1 and R2 historic resource properties, there are about 2,500 total sites. Based on these numbers, we have a smaller volume to address, but they must be considered even though it may not have the same impact as R1 SB9 eligible properties, which, if you remember, is approximately 127,955. So there are the proposed objective design standards for historic properties in R1 and R2 zoning districts. So in terms of the permitting process, sites that are part of the City of San Jose's historic resource inventory will proceed with the ministerial approval through Chapter 9.5 of the zoning code, which will have the design standards. But please note that of those in the HRI, the historic resource inventory, that are part of the national or state register or a city landmark must go through a historic preservation permit or a similar discretionary review. As part of the Chapter 9.5 standards, buildings cannot be demolished for SB9 type units, and lots are not allowed to be split to create SB9 type units. The historic structure detached unit cannot be taller or wider than the primary building. It must be set back at least 45 feet from the front property line, and the attached unit must be located along the primary dwelling's rear facade. The elevation must remain the same as the primary street-facing elevation, and the material must match the historic primary dwelling exterior wall and roofing materials. City Council also directed staff to ensure structures built before 1950 in R2 two-family zoning districts to be evaluated with a discretionary review. So planning staff determined of the 7,980 sites, total SB9 eligible sites in an R2 zoning district, 515 structures have been identified as being built before 1950. For these parcels, if a qualified historic report indicates they are eligible for the historic resource inventory, then you'd follow the process I had mentioned in the previous slide. So following the Chapter 9.5 standards, except when it's a CEQA level resource like a city landmark or on the National or State Register, we would require a historic preservation permit or similar discretionary review. And then if they're not eligible, then you would just use the regular R2 city streamline standards and process in what's going to be Chapter 9. So now, transitioning to other new state laws, I am going to be presenting on accessory dwelling units, which I will refer to as ADUs, for multifamily zones, and how recently adopted ADU state laws will be reflected in the city's municipal code. So as of January this year, State Senate Bill 1211 streamlines the construction of ADUs on multifamily properties with the goal of simplifying permitting processes and to utilize existing spaces like parking. On the top right-hand side, this table shows the different options you could have. If you have a new multifamily dwelling, you are allowed 2 detached ADUs. If you have an existing multifamily dwelling of up to 7 dwelling units, the number of detached units you can have has to match. For example, let's say you have a 4-unit apartment, you could have up to 4 detached ADUs. If you have 8 or more existing dwelling units, you are capped at 8 detached ADUs per the state law. And now we will move on to next steps. So here is our public hearing timeline. So in November, we will be meeting with the Airport Land Use Commission to present our proposed ordinance updates. Also in November, we will be presenting the proposed ordinance updates to Planning Commission. And then in December, we will present to City Council. This presentation will be published on the city's website. You can also visit our webpage. I've included the URL in this slide at the bottom there, so you can keep in touch and also look for more additional updates. And so now we can go ahead and move into our public comment break. I'd love to hear your questions and comments, just like we did earlier. We can allocate 2 minutes, but of course, we'll make sure we hear from everyone. And for those who called in, if you can press *6 to unmute yourself, and just go ahead and unmute yourself when your name is called. For those who need interpretation, once again, please wait for the end. We will go ahead and begin with English, and we are now available to answer your questions. So Brent, who do we have as our first speaker?
All right, it looks like Sandra, you have your hand raised. I will go ahead and allow you to speak.
Thank you very much for this presentation. It's been very informative. I'm just a little confused on a few items. So is it my understanding that the maximum number of units on an SB9 split are going to be 2 for each lot? That's my first question. Then I'm a little confused on the last set of slides on multifamily ADUs, because kind of with SB9, we don't necessarily have single family zoning anymore in the sense that almost every lot could be split. So are you saying that there could be, we split the lot and then there could be 4 units on one of the split sides? Could you clarify that?
Sure. Let me try to make sure that I understand that correct. So we have 2 questions here. So the first one was for the maximum number of units for an SB9, would it be 2 for each lot? And I believe that is correct, but Aparna, Martina, feel free to clarify as well if you'd like.
Yeah,
Yes.
so SB9 is fairly unique-ish in the state law in that it does give cities the ability to limit the number of ADUs from what they would otherwise be able to do under state law once they turn into multifamily, right? So yeah, to your point, Sandra, but once it's a duplex, can't they build like 5 ADUs on each duplex property? Well, SB9 does allow the city to say we're not going to allow that. So our current SB9 ordinance allowances we're not proposing to change those. So if you split the lot, it's up to 2 homes on each split lot. If you don't split the lot, so you were to just use SB9 to turn a 1-family house, say, into a 2-family house, you still can only go up to 4 units total. So it would be 4 on an undivided lot, or if you divide the lot, 2 per lot, if 2 per lot maximum, right? So using the SB9 law, you will get to 4. We will still have the rules in place that you can only get up to 4 using SB9, even if you split the lots.
So Martina, if you could help me out here, at one point, my understanding was ADUs could be as low as 18 inches off the property line. Are we still maintaining, per that one drawing, it used to be that you used in March and September, or are we going to allow ADUs on SB9 that are 18 inches from the rear lot?
So we currently in San Jose, ADUs can be built at 0 lot line, whether through SB9 or not, right? So yes, right now they could go to 0 lot line on an SB9 property, and we're not proposing to change that. We actually would not be allowed to set that rule for SB9 subdivisions because, or SB9 projects, because uniformly across the zoning district, they are allowed to have a 0 lot line. So we couldn't say if you use SB9, you cannot have a 0 lot line. So yeah, that would be no change from our current allowances.
Because SB9 had a 4-foot setback, and the original one back in December of 2021, we were thinking of, it was always 4 feet, no matter whether it was an ADU or whether it was some other unit. But now it could be 0 plot line with special fire protection, or 18 inches with no special fire. Have I got that right?
I think generally you have to fire. I'm not sure on exactly when you have to stop fire rating it, but yeah, if you get, close enough to the property line, you do need to do fire rating. But yeah, no, I'm sorry if that was misunderstood originally. That 4 foot for SB9 has only always been in reference to the actual primary dwelling units. ADUs do get to use the ADU allowances, which the city has had 0 for many years at this point.
Thank you for your clarification.
Yeah. And I'll say not a lot of people don't do it. It is a lot more expensive, so, but we do see them.
Okay, great. And Sandra, I believe you had another question as well regarding the multifamily ADUs. Would you mind just re-asking the question, please? Oh, I don't know if you can unmute.
I think it was a flavor. It was sort of asking kind of
Similar?
in context.
Okay.
But Sandra, if you do have it, raise your hand again if you have any follow-ups on that one. But
yeah, it's not, I'm trying to click ask to unmute, but maybe raise your hand again if you want to ask that question. Should we move on to our next question, Rena?
Yes, please.
Okay, so Van, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak.
Yes, I have a question regarding the size limitation of the 4 units or the 2 units on a subdivided lot. I understand there are formulas and rules around FAR and lot coverage, but are there also additional proposed rules on the size of either the primary unit or the ADU?
Yeah, I can address that question. So as far as the lot coverage and the floor area ratios are concerned for the primary units, we would apply those rules regardless of the two separate lots, the subdivided lots. And as far as the ADUs are concerned, we would have to provide at least a 800 square foot ADU per state law, and that is a requirement that we will adhere to. So we would allow the flexibility to build that unit. And the same goes for the SB9 as well. That's state law.
So, I mean, in
Yeah, and
short, no, we are not proposing any size limitations other than the FAR and coverage. The FAR will and coverage, together should provide that limitation, which is consistent with how we do homes otherwise in San Jose. We regulate them by FAR. So no limit.
okay, does that mean that, currently we have a maximum allowed square footage for ADUs, which is, say, 1,200 square foot, I remember, for lots that are larger than 9,000 square feet. Does that rule still exist or does that go away?
We're keeping the ADU rules the same. So if you're doing an ADU on an SB9 property, other than the limit on the number of ADUs, right, you can do, but all of the other regulations would be the same.
Okay. So there is a size limitation on the
For
square footage.
ADUs, yes, yeah. Sorry, for primary dwellings, it's going to be regulated by the FAR, and the coverage for ADUs just follow our ADU standards, which do have a size limitation.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your question, Van. Next up, Evan, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak.
Hello, thank you. I do have a question regarding the slide that's talking about the the unit configuration for R2 family. I just want to see, like, so going back to one question earlier, if you do SB9, it doesn't matter if you have ADU or other, like primary units. The total number is 4 out of the split lot. So I'm looking at this unit 2 configuration. If the lot is vacant, then you can have, let's say, two, a set of duplex and then 2 detached or attached ADUs, and that's the maximum allowed. And whatever that says, that garage conversion doesn't really apply to a lot that's vacant, right? Just want to, I'm getting kind of confused right now. But yeah, just want to know what that unit configuration for R2 family is meant for. It's just to explain conversion.
Just wanted to clarify, this is the slide you were asking
Yes,
about? Okay.
yes.
I mean, do you guys want to answer that or you want me to do it? Yeah, I mean, so again, this is just literally reflective of the state ADU allowances. So that is where that conversion comes from. So under the state allowance for the attached ADUs, if you use that state ADU provisions, you get you can do the converted ADU. So yeah, for a new build, obviously it wouldn't have a conversion because you don't have anything to convert. You could come back later and convert, say, a garage to an ADU, but yeah, it wouldn't make sense to be able to do the conversion option under state law if you don't have anything to convert.
Okay, thank you. But then just to clarify, right, even if, let's say I have a R2 lot, right? So and then I do SB9 lot split. I meet all the requirements and I built 2 ADU and then 2, a set of duplex. That's maximum of total 4 units. Even if I have a garage, I cannot convert that because didn't you say earlier there's only maximum of 4 units allowed?
So R2, SB9 does not qualify for R2. Or R2 lots
Okay.
of single family zone, so you wouldn't be using SB9 per se.
Okay.
You would using the city, the allowances the city has to do two-family dwellings on R2, and in which case you would be looking at building a duplex with the, what is it, up to 382 and or plus the conversion one. If you did want to split an R2 lot, do a subdivision on R2 lot, we'd encourage you to look at SB 1123 because that's a multifamily zone, and that is the or 684 and 1123. That is the bill for subdividing
Okay.
multifamily zone. So if you're trying to do a lot split in, or subdivide an R2, look at 1123. In which case, you can get up to 10 actually, most likely.
Yeah, just micro
Yeah.
units. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
no ADUs. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for
It's a soup of state laws, I understand. So we're trying to make it as clear as we can.
Okay.
Okay, look, yeah, Van, I'm not sure if you raised your hand again, but you can go ahead and unmute now, or you should be able to unmute.
No, that was by mistake. Thank you.
Oh, okay, no worries. Well, it looks like we don't have any raised hands anymore in this main chat room for English.
Okay. Then I will ask if there are any Spanish. Feel free to raise your hand. Don't see any. Chinese. Feel free to raise your hand if you'd like. And give it a minute here. And then Vietnamese as well. I know we didn't have any earlier, so I think we should
Yeah, I would
be.
like to add that we do not have any additional questions in the chat. We did receive a question from Sandra about, okay, I do see Sandra's hand is up.
Okay.
So Sandra, you can go ahead and speak.
I wanted to thank you all for your time and for explaining. I really appreciate the visuals that you've put together and your time and your courtesy in answering the questions that were asked. So I just wanted to thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. And if you think of any questions that you didn't think of tonight, as you know, always feel free to reach out to us, and that goes for anybody. We definitely want to make sure everyone understands it and can kind of comment, based on a good understanding of what we're doing. So appreciate that.
Yeah, I just want to say I also appreciate that comment too, Sandra. And shout out to Rena because Rena did a really great job helping us facilitate this meeting.
Thank you. You guys are all so sweet. Okay. On that happy note, let's go ahead and move to the last slide here. So once again, thank you so much, everyone, for attending, sharing your thoughts with us and questions. As you can see here on the slide, we have our contact information listed. So we'll keep this up in case you want to just write it down or maybe just take a quick picture. Yeah, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any additional questions or comments. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you have a great evening. And we can leave this up for a minute or two, Brent. Thank you.
And as listed in the chat, this presentation will be available to all the attendees. We'll send it via email. We'll also post it on our webpage. And Martina has posted the link to the page where you can find it. It should be posted within a week or so. Well, thank you, everyone. I think we are, yeah, I don't see any additional comments here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that should be it for tonight then. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll go ahead and close out the meeting now. Thank you.